Hello and welcome to the monthly Journal of Expressive Writing Open Mic. I'm Kelly Dumar, your producer and host, and I'm really thrilled to have all of you here with us tonight for our feature, Quintin Collins, as well as our probably about 15 people reading in our open mic following our feature. And we are going to be recording this for you, and the recording has started. And now I also want to introduce Jen Minotti, because we would not be here without Jen Minotti during the pandemic, 2020, founding the Journal of Expressive Writing. And I'd love to ask you to say a couple of words, if you would, Jen.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, everyone. It's so great. I always say this is my favorite night of the month, and it's the truth. And Kelly's so kind. I started the Journal of Expressive Writing during the pandemic as a way to bring people together and to essentially share our voices when we were all isolated. But I never, ever imagined an open mic. I only imagined the journal. So really, this is all, I'm so grateful to Kelly for bringing the open mic portion of the journal to all of you here tonight, because now we can share our voices live and build those connections even further. So thank you so much, Kelly. Thank you. It's such an honor to have Quintin Collins here with us today as our featured author. And I want to thank Katerina, who will be behind the scenes, making sure that it runs smoothly with Kelly. And just for all of you here who will be reading your work, and for everyone who's here to listen and be appreciators of writing and poetry. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Jen, and thanks, Katerina. As those of you who've been here before know, I like to choose a poem in advance of our gathering, and I like to read that poem at the very beginning before I introduce our feature. And I've chosen a poem for tonight by Maya Geddes, and it is I Examined the Moment. I examined the moment for fractures, for signs that the moment would not hold. I examined the moment in order to determine how much of it was mine and for how long. I examined the moment only to realize it might actually be more than a moment, maybe part of one larger moment. I whispered to and shouted at and caressed the moment, pushed and pulled, but the moment held, still and steady, with a heartbeat all its own. It told me to go on to the next moment and that it would soon be gone. So I did move on to another moment and then another, though I knew I had fallen in love. And now we are so happy to welcome Quintin Collins here to read tonight to us from his most recent book, Plane Tickets for Stolen People, and possibly from others of his collections, like The Dandelion Speaks of Survival. And then we'll have a chance to have a Q&A with him. And so you're welcome to put any questions you have for Quintin into the chat room, and I will look for those and try to answer them. Quintin is a writer, assistant director of the Solstice Low Residency Master of Fine Arts and Creative Writing program, and a poetry editor for Salamander. His work appears in many print and online publications, such as Sidereal Magazine, Superstition Review, Glass, A Journal of Poetry, Solstice Literary Magazine, and others. Winner of a Pushcart Prize and the 2019 Atlantis Award from the Poets Below, Quintin's publishing accolades include multiple Best of the Net nominations, and he was a finalist for the 2020 Red Divider Beacon Street Prize. Quintin's first full-length collection of poems, The Dandelion Speaks of Survival, which was a finalist for the 2020 Alice James Award and the 2021 Sheila Margaret Motten Book Prize, is available from Cherry Castle Publishing. His second collection, Plane Tickets for Stolen People, selected by Marcus Jackson as winner of the Journal's 2020 Charles B. Wheeler Poetry Prize and honor book for the Black Caucus of the American Library Association's 2023 Best Poetry Literary Award is available from Ohio State University Press, Mad Creek Books. I want to tell you what the poet Terrence Hayes has said about claim tickets for stolen people. Terrence Hayes says, reading claim tickets for stolen people creates the feeling one has studying a transcendental sonogram. Collins's poetry brings inner life into focus. Blackness is reclaimed, celebrated, embodied. He can give shape to Barack Obama's tan suit and Jimi Hendrix's guitar. He can be furious, funny, and fatherly in a single poem with a range as broad as his compassion. This is a marvelous book. Claim Tickets for Stolen People gives shape to our magical, mercurial world. And I will say also what Taylor Bias has said about claim tickets. Claim Tickets for Stolen People is an alternative history book in which Black storying, Black sayings, and Black mythology are the truest things we know. With an archaeologist's precision, Collins digs a Black truth from the soil of historical erasure. Welcome, Quintin Collins. We are so grateful to have you here tonight.
Thank you so much, Kelly. And thank you to you and to Jen, to Katarina for hosting. I know that that's a lot of work getting all of this together and then doing everything on the ground the day of. So I really do appreciate everything that goes into that. So tonight I'm going to read a bunch of poems from Claim Tickets for Stolen People. And then I'm going to conclude with one poem from the manuscript I'm currently working on for this third book that I've been cobbling together for like 3 years now. So the first poem I'm going to read is called The Freedom Trail Tour Guide Shyly Mentioned Slaves Were Sold at Boston Harbor. What brick would guide us across the Atlantic? Ocean floor sand, this grain was once bone, once body. Crispus Attucks would receive his own branch on the trail from state in Congress to Framingham, to the harbor, to waters charted from the Ivory Coast to the Americas. Whose tax dollars would pay for the masonry? Lawmakers ask. Lawmakers allege some history isn't worth it to save. Ask Faneuil Hall, the busker who beats buckets, pots, and pans. First, put a few bills in his hat. He'll explain where to find lineage. Check between the stone, not the red, white, and blue bricks from the Common to Bunker Hill. Time flays these streets to their cobbles. No history will sprout if you place a seed in the pothole. You won't heal the wound. Some tourists comment how nice it is that they can see remains of times past on the USS Constitution. They hop on and hop off a trolley, stop at a bar, celebrate the liberties of their bodies in waves of Sam Adams until the last dregs trail down their throats. So this next poem, keeping with the complicated history of Boston theme, is called What Waves Will Carry Back to You. And it was one that I wrote on a prompt to give a dramatic monologue from perspective of something non-living. So this is from the perspective of the harbor. New water in my mouth. I rise as you and yours dismantle the planet. Another Starbucks plastic cup in my cheek. Another whale watcher searches for what wonders reach my surface. I hold America's history in my waves. Tall ships roped at the docks, bodies chained at the neck. On my tongue, British tea. I drank that revolution. Now commuter ferries dock in my teeth. I could dredge bones. lay skulls at State and Atlantic? Would you auction off a femur, a souvenir for your children to clutch on their duck boat tour? For now, a Coke can, a plastic straw I spit at Rose Wharf, a king tide. My waves return what you discard. All right. So now I'm going to read two of the Barack Obama poems in this book. And this was a book where I kind of had several years to really kind of consider what Barack's presidency meant for me personally, as much as what it meant for the country. So there's a series of poems in here that kind of address him and that legacy. So this first one is called "What I Would Ask About Barack's Post-Racial White House." What manner of gospel raised Barack Hussein Obama on Sunday mornings in the White House? Muscle memory of mop bucket and vacuum on the Sabbath. Who awakened his hands? Smokey Norfolk, Yolanda Adams, Mary. In this hand-me-down house, spine and rib frames behind the sheetrock, how often did Barack sleep late on a Saturday morning? Or did the voices never stop their whispers in his ears? I saw what he wrought upon his soul. I imagine the dead beneath the south lawn could snare a root around his toes if he did not tread with caution. Am I asking too much of the mountain that I raised for him? No, these questions are supposed to be for Barack, not my illusion that on November 4th, 2008, we buried this country's history in Grant Park. We lowered it into the dirt, threw confetti on the grave, or so I thought, but these questions aren't for me. These questions are for a Black man in a tan suit in charge of white America. Final question. Barack said Trayvon Martin could have been his son. In that moment, did he know that he shouldered a cross that could drag him back down Golgotha? It happened, but I stared at the hilltop, and I haven't looked toward the ground since. And so the next poem is called Obama's Tan Suit, for those of us who are fond of presidential scandal being as simple as a suit color. Obama's tan suit. Button-down shirt our mother cinched around necks years ago. We outgrew the yokes. Tie clipped behind the collar, pant hems retreated from Payless Oxfords, and our only suit. Only the baptism, then take it off. Put it back on the hanger so it doesn't wrinkle. Only a little big in the sleeves. Only a coffee stain that should come right out. Dry cleaned only once a year, if even. Only a rental. Only job candidate without one. Only Black job candidate. Only the first person interview. Only borrowed from our fathers. Only borrowed from our uncles. Only without matching slacks and jacket. Only Obama in a tan suit. Color after Black, charcoal, and navy preempt our budgets. Tan, a hue reserved for summer, and disposable income. Imagine that the suit we wear for our cousin's wedding doesn't have to look good enough for our funerals, that our families could bury us in our favorite colors, tailored waist, jacket that doesn't parachute our bodies, a suit we don't have to grow into over time, only to outgrow after only one use. Only a tan suit. Why not purple or burgundy? Why not velvet and rhinestones? Why not something Bootsy or James or Little Richard or Prince would don? A hue that hides stains, where we can finally spill our cognac play our music, dance our dances, let our skin sweat through the fabric. On our lapels, we too could pin America. And so this next poem is called Generation Snowflake, back when that was a big thing that people like to call people who believe in human rights, and equality and equity. Generation Snowflake. This is how they like us when we float down from the sky, when they can catch us in their palms. Let the heat melt us to water, cold a concession to enjoy our presence. They tolerate only if we leave our ice, if we lie on the pavement. Do not obstruct their view. Do not gather into the banks on their roads. Do not travel sideways. They like us predictable, light, malleable. If they can gather several of us packed together into a ball they can throw for fun, that's when they like us. Only when we powder their Christmas, when we do not blizzard or lake effect, do not accumulate more than an inch. Do not grow into a bomb cyclone. Do not rush upon them as an avalanche. They like when they can carve us with skis and snowboards, when they don't have to bend their backs to shovel us off their property. This is how they like us. All right, so the next poem is called The American Killing Field. Charlottesville has started to fade into a, remember when Boston's free speech rally will happen tomorrow. From halfway across America, my mother warns me to exercise caution. I tell her Massachusetts is blue. She knows what scopes and iron sights frame Black bodies. She watched cops choke Eric Garner on a New York street. She watched cops shoot Tamir Rice. Rekia Boyd's killer resigned before he could be fired. Another bullet ricochets across America. We debate the gun smoke. Forget the trigger finger. Our mothers never lose sight of our Black bodies downrange of the American killing field, or the muzzle flash when the media murders our character. For the gun that takes the body, they grab a graduation photo. For what America does to us, they grab the casket lid. And so this next poem is called Pluto B Orbit Uncommon. I be dead. Been dead, been dying, been death God. I been a body bounce round the sun. Been a body celestial outside Earth atmosphere. The scientists say at most been asteroid. Say I ain't been a body worth measure. Say I got ocean beneath my skin. Say my brain is full of ice. Say I be cold. Say I be dead. Say I be dead to Neptune, but water, say life on Mars. So why I be dead? To NASA in them school books, being where I be abnormal. Say my axis sits sideways, seasons a mess. Say I always got skin dark, skin light too. Say I got wandering poles, ain't no true north atop my head. Ain't no man make me wear words for Earth. I be orbit uncommon. I be chaos, been had in orbit, upset ordinances. I be on your science magazine. Methane ice glossy, halo crater scars, but I still be dead. Still disposable, being body, being celestial, body, be body. So who gonna tell me I be nothing but rock? Who gonna deny I dominate my neighborhood? So now this next poem, little change of pace, is called Elegy as a Room for My Dead. I try to reinvent you. A white gravestone in a field of white gravestones. I conjure this image instead of you. When you died, I was asked to write an elegy for the funeral. I didn't know how to make you from the blank page, another cavity for the body you inhabited to fill. Even now, nearly a decade later, I recall the lazy boy, how you left the indent waiting for your return, like the left margin expects my cursor will come back, another foot to raise you, another foot from the soil. Row by row, the headstones sprawl, stanzas for the dead. Did you know stanza comes from Italian? It means room. Let me reconstruct you in the living room. You sit, radio on your chest, socks at the Cubs for the Crosstown Classic, a metro train roaring, then leaving. The leaving is where I ruminate, that the room is dirt, and the real room is a room that's empty of you for almost a decade now. How much have I reinvented you in this poem versus rendering your absence in stanza breaks? Each return another reach just short of heaven. Over which ocean will I scatter these ashes I wrote for you? I can't even properly visit your headstone in a poem. All right, so two more. This next one I'm gonna do a screen share for because a lot of the way it works is based on some spelling things here. You'll see once we get into it. And so this is also from Claim Tickets. It's actually the last poem in the book. It's called Etymology featuring Urban Dictionary, and it's after Etymology by Era D. Matthews. And so can everybody see this okay? It's a good size. All right, perfect. Because my parents liked a filmmaker, or so I'm told, Pulp Fiction means blood, splatter, spells Marvin's brain on the rear windshield. Means Quentin Tarantino, my parents would spell Quintin, their own magic transformation, but still fits in mouths when teachers roll call or for job interviews, but still Quintins or Quintons or Quintins when Quentin lives right there in the email handle. Google calls me Quintus, a fifth of whiskey or lazy speakers who drop the N in T like Quentin. Also rhymes with gin and sin. Almost in, but since the start begged the universe to turn their tongues to pronounce N like N. Evict the residents of E in my name. Google says St. Quentin martyred in Gaul. Body in a marsh, what persecution removes my head? Just a misspelling. Just a microaggression, Q among friends, a nickname, a relic of the I try to resurrect. Urban Dictionary says a princess called my name, says big dick, says sex appeal, says ultimate sex machine, an intimacy withheld, like the proper spelling in every birthday card. My mother still writes Quintin until I die. The I dies for E when a white man writes a bullet for my brain. The E not empty, nor the chamber. Urban Dictionary says empty of emotion, but fun. Who writes these expectations to my name? I tried to tell you. I tried to told you. It's spelled Quintin. Google asked, did you mean Quentin? I mean, how can I voice these syllables? My mouth a bloody mess. All right, so I'll stop that. Oh, just lost track of everybody. Oh, there you are. Perfect. And so now I'm going to read this one last poem, which is one from this manuscript in progress that I've been working on since 2021. I'm currently at a point where I've had the whole thing reviewed a couple times, and I'm going to go on this grand endeavor to rearrange it because the arrangement I had before is not really working out. So that's going to be fun. But there's some poems in there that I really love and I'm really proud of. And I'm happy to see where this goes in the future. So I will leave you with a poem called Every day I wake up and get dressed for my own funeral. And the title of the poem is taken from a poem by Enzo Cylon Surin. And I just kind of riffed on that and what he kind of got at in his poem to write this one. So this is called Every Day I Wake Up and Get Dressed for My Own Funeral. Thank you all again for coming out to listen. Thank you to the host and everyone who's doing everything behind the scenes. It means a lot to me. Some mother always said to wear a clean pair of underwear in case of emergencies in which EMTs need to cut off your pants. And some other mother said dress like every outfit is your last, as if the funeral walks in lockstep. I iron wrinkles for my jeans, shirts, chinos. I shine my shoes. I spray myself with cologne. The Star Wars socks indicate I have a morsel of personality, but only on days when I don't sink into a pair of sweatpants, of which I own several in the same style and various colors. Underwear is still clean, but I've reclined into remote work. Mornings when I commune with other Black dads at school drop-off. Drawstrings cinched round our waist, shared longing for sleep, and a moment when we can leave our keys on a nail by the door. We share a laughter devoid of glances over each other's shoulders, reapers in the background, rubbing palms, eager to swipe sides, while I wear an Empire Strikes Back t-shirt with a grease stain. Some mother would remind me how much we never know whom we might meet, whether death or a CEO with a job offer. Another mother would remind me to starch and press the Paul. Truth is, I wasn't listening until Trayvon. Some dying undresses every angle we groom and straighten in America. Attire matters little when a cop's badge and bullet whittles all your niceties down to whatever monster arises from the police report. What I'm saying is the coroner won't know I ironed collars first, or that I wore sweatpants the day after 3 days of slacks, or that my daughter says I look nice regardless of what I have on. That was never the point. Trimming my beard won't unhitch the casket affixed to my ankles. Salvation doesn't take root in the full or half Windsor knot around my neck. The point is, a mother ensured I cared enough to wash my ass before I set foot in a world that will dirty my pleasantries at every turn. And no home or store-bought remedy will resolve certain bloodstains on whites. Like I know, the other Black dads know. Laugh now, stash a suit in the closet for later. Some mother is my mother. Some mother is my mama. Another mama is my mama, reminding me to lint roll dog hair from uniforms. Another mother straightens the tie and collar on her son's neck in the casket. I need deep pockets for all this dying I must carry. I need a needle and thread for holes at the bottom. Another knee creases the button down on my back. Another body dressed in America, bloodied red, beaten blue, white chalk outlined. When will it be my turn to don the brutality? If today is my day, this country a custodian from my life story, sweatpants or dress, I'm clothed for the description, death pulling at my seams. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Quintin. What a wonderful reading. That poem is published in Solstice, summer 2023. And I actually put the hyperlink into the chat in case anybody wanted to have a closer look at it in print. And it says it was the runner-up, and I may have looked that up before, but I don't remember right now. What was it a runner-up for?
For the Stephen Dunn Poetry Prize.
That's right. That's right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Hard to believe it's the runner-up, but that's the runner-up. Okay. All right. Thank you so much for reading that. And so I do know that we have at least one question, phrase question in the chat room, and I want to get to that. But I did want to ask you about this question of, you had mentioned that one of your poems started with a prompt, the one about the being in Boston Harbor and being the writing from the point of view, personified point of view of Boston Harbor. That particular poem came from a prompt, and Faye is asking about the question of where do your poems come from? I'm kind of curious about, is this an occasional thing, the poem came from a prompt? Where would you just talk to us a little bit about your particular way of generating ideas for poems and how you do that?
Yeah, so one of the great things about not only having gone through grad school, but now helping run a grad program is I get to sit in on all these classes just to check out how our faculty and guest faculty are doing. And I think this, when I wrote that particular poem, it was maybe the summer that I was training to take over the role I'm in now. And I had already written the Pluto poem and did it at my reading the night before that class. And so I don't remember how it came up that that was just like a line, that there was a prompt the next day that was like, do the same thing. Like, oh, by the way, like this is what he did last night and you read this. Everybody try to write that. That's what we're like talking about today. And so I kind of came up with this other poem because this entire book, Claim Tickets for Stolen People, was a very different approach from the Dandelion Speaks for Survival. So Dandelion was my grad thesis when I was a student at Solstice. And that was such an interesting thing because, you know, you spend 2 years in the program writing and writing and writing, and then you get to your final semester and you're supposed to be like, all right, what can I revise to put into, for poets, can be a full length collection of poems. And I got home after that final residency when I'm getting ready to start, you know, I'm in this final semester, and I was like, I can't use anything. I was like, all this stuff I've written for 2 years, none of it is revisable enough to the point where I have to just change a few things and it's good to go. And so I spent a lot of time in my final semester kind of rewriting things from scratch. And it kind of worked in a lot of ways, like a heavy revision. Like, all right, so here's this poem that you wrote, read it, absorb it, and then write it again without looking at it. And that was such an interesting experience because it also led to a lot of discovery about some issues I was having with my work. One of them is I'm from the suburbs of Chicago, and I had a very stark realization while going home to visit family that I'm not writing from the perspective of someone who's from a suburb of Chicago, but is still within the cultural sphere of the city, and how that affected the language I was trying to use to build poems, what kind of images I was using. And so I also had an opportunity to work with Nicole Therese Dutton in that semester, and her approach to feedback is, I want to say it's a little ethereal. So an example would be she'll say like, all right, so here's what I'm seeing in this poem. Like, one, why are you keeping your reader at arm's length? Two, look at this piece of art for 5 minutes and then go back and think about how you want to revise, which was really like, wow. I didn't know if I was going to be doing that kind of discovery in my last semester, but I needed it because it helped me really get to the sense of like, oh, there are things that are unique to me. You know, they're unique to me as a writer that I have not written about because I just wasn't in a place where I understood who I was. Now, the thing about Claim Tickets, though, Claim Tickets was 100% in an intellectual pursuit. And essentially what it was is I read the Moon is Trans by Joshua Jennifer Espinoza in a workshop. And after reading it enough times and understanding like why this poem needed to exist, you know, why does there need to be a poem that says the moon is trans? I was like, what if I just tried to do that for a whole book? And
Yeah.
so I just started with a list of various things, places, feelings, objects, and said like, all right, so I'm going to write a poem about this, and I have to try and find very overt or very subtle ways to infuse the language of Blackness into that object or that place or that feeling. And then also like, hey, like let's tackle some things that are stereotypically Black. Let's see how we can work on reclaiming them, as like doing this like job of taking back from the oppressive forces that take everything from the oppressed. And so this book was, it was really, I hate to say, it was really easy to write, and it's part of the reason I'm struggling probably so much with this third book is because this one was so easy. I've forgotten what it's like to really work, and have to like work through some struggles. But yeah, like it very much was just a process of like, all right, here's the topic, write the poem, cross it off. Here's the topic, write the poem, cross it off. And so it was very
Wow,
structured.
wow,
And the southern one
wow.
has been, this new thing has been all in the heart. It's been all like, all right, I really started writing the poems on this book in April 2021, but the first few poems that really started it were while I was in inpatient care, and I was just kind of really all in my feelings about things, and I was also on like a ton of prednisone, which like gives you a lot of energy potentially as a side effect. So I was writing a lot, and I was like, wow, this is really cool. But like when I got to the point where I was revising, I was like, oh, this was all writing from the heart. Like I got to figure out how I scale and shape this. So I'm kind of back where I was with the first book, where I'm not really using my mind as much at the front, whereas I'm now trying to shape, um, this huge lump of clay I just kind of threw at a wall and said, all right, now I have to make it look pretty. Long-winded answer to a short question, but
A
yeah, it
fabulously
varies.
long-winded, wonderful answer. Did not expect all of that. And I find it really, really fascinating because your poems seem to be coming fast and furious in the sense of, I mean, three collections. It's been a short number of years. How wonderful to hear that you rewrote your poems for your thesis. That was the Pushcart award-winning collection, your first.
It was actually the Pluto poem in the second.
Yeah, so amazing. So let's see. I've got Faye is raising her hand. So Faye, where are you? Just unmute and tell us what you want to tell us or ask. Thought I saw you raising your hand.
That was a mistake, but since it was
Oh,
mistake, I'm just gonna
I
say
thought it was an urgent question.
thank
Go
you,
ahead.
thank you for all that. It was a marvelous reading.
Thank you,
Yes.
Faye. It's always great to see you.
Big fan.
So, well, Susan Dines is raising her hand. Susan, are you raising your hand because you have a question?
Yes.
Okay.
I notice, Quintin, when you read, you take a moment as if you're getting in character. Like there's a breath before each poem. And I wonder if, because you're such a passionate reader and very engaging, and I'm wondering if you're trying to get into the voice of each individual poem, or is it just you're keeping a steady voice throughout? But I feel like almost like each poem has it's like its own personality, and you're getting into that personality.
Yeah, it's a little bit of that. Some of it is really just like, all right, look at it, absorb as much of it as you can into your eyeballs so that when you get started, you can have a good run before you have to look down again. But yeah, a lot of it is stopping to think. So one of the best pieces of advice I got when it came to reading poems. So I originally got into poetry because I was fascinated. Well, I wouldn't say I got into poetry at the start, but I got serious about poetry in high school because my parents had like Deaf Poetry Jam on a lot. And so, Chicago slam poetry is huge in Chicago, more so than it is in a lot of places, just because supposedly that's where it started. So kind of having that tradition and that background brought me to a certain place of like what I expect from when people read poems. But then on top of that, I got this brilliant advice from Laurent Bosselar, and she said, when you read every word like it's new, like every single word like it's new. And so sometimes, like for me, so when I practice reading these poems, and I don't read it the same way every time. And every time I do a reading, while I might generally still kind of get into the same cadence, same voice, because I wrote the poem in a way to do a certain thing, it's really kind of just like level setting myself. Like, all right, how do we want to start this? I know I unless the poem really calls for it, I don't like to read too fast. Although I do have some poems that are meant to be read really fast. But really, it's just yeah, like all right, stop, think about it. Where are we going to go with this one now in this moment? Because I might read it again in like 2 days and it's going to be slightly different. And it's sometimes just remembering, like, like I wrote this book years ago. Who was the person who wrote this, and how do they want this to sound, and what voice needs to go with it. And otherwise, just like taking a breath. It's like how tennis players have their little routines before they serve. Like you just kind of stop for a second and let yourself kind of run into it. And it also helps me not read too fast so that people can understand what I'm saying.
It becomes the reading itself is this creative act, this creative performance, or this creative process, this creative encounter. It's wonderful that you have that energy to bring to it. It isn't just words on the page, it is you making it new. Now, Paulina Van is asking, the first line of each poem is riveting. Is this deliberate, or is this what emerges?
So first lines that's another Laurent Bosselar lesson that I got when I was a student at Solstice, is that you don't have a lot of time to get someone's attention. So first lines have to, even if the first line itself, within the first stanza, you have to grab people. And this is something that not only did I hear from Laurent, but Terrence Hayes is a writer in residence for Solstice, and that's how I got to really get to know him. And when I was a student, he did a class where he essentially talked about, hey, here's what I do when I'm like, I get like 20 manuscripts to judge for a contest. Here's how I do that efficiently. And one of the things he kind of talked about was like, all right, so here are like the first 3 poems I will read. And here's how much attention I give to them when reading them. And so like listening to him talk about these things was kind of like, why, like, okay, first, your opening has to have something. I like to, where possible, have, I need to have some kind of image very close up front. But if anything, I just want to know that like when I start this, someone has to be interested in reading more. Even if they like get to the end of it and they feel like, oh, I don't gel with that. But like I don't want to lose them in the first line, because I know that as an editor myself, sometimes when I'm looking at poems, like if I have 40 poems in my queue, every month, on a normal month, and I'm trying to give them all equal attention, but after my readers have already told me, my very trusted readers have already told me what I need to, consider about the work, I move very efficiently. So I want to give people who are reading my work that same level of efficiency. So I want them to be able to feel something right off the bat. Because otherwise, like if not, like what am I doing this for? But also I understand and recognize though that in many ways it's a very Western approach to poetry. And that there are some traditions that do that very differently. And they do it very well. And some poems even end very quietly. Like Wanda Coleman just like continues to fascinate me in the ways that like so many of like her poems ended extremely quiet, and I still can't figure out how to master that, where you kind of get like hit with the freight train at the end, but like it's so silent when it
Quiet freight
happens.
train.
Yes, very very quiet freight train. It's definitely a skill, but it's one that I haven't figured out for myself yet.
Quintin, I'm going to wind down the questions, but Serene Speakman is asking, are you a bit scared to be releasing to the world poems from the heart?
I think that when I was younger and I was like reading at open mics in college, like sure, because youthful people are youthful people and very non-serious about trauma in a lot of cases. But I think one of the biggest things about it is I tend to write about things I've given myself enough like distance from it to not only kind of be past certain things, but to think about how do I make this thing that happened to me, maybe, or some people like me. Um, a lot of my speakers are synthesis of myself and other people. How do I make this reach somebody who has never experienced this? Or how do I make this reach somebody who has? And so I have to kind of be past, my grip on that it's so close to me, because part of that may also mean changing things that actually happen to make the story of the poem work. The other part of that is like my parents read my first book, and my mother was distraught that certain aspects of my childhood were tough, and neither of them knew about it. And I knew when the book was getting published, like that's going to happen. I don't know what they're going to say about this third book. I'm really mad at God at this in this third book. But like as a vehicle to other things, I'm just like, yeah, I have a lot of religious families, so I don't know what they're going to say when they see this one. But the thing is, like, I can't concern myself with that because, like, you know, I am definitely the speaker, but not the speaker in these things.
Quintin does another wonderful answer. I think my final question is something like, what do you think tonight is the most important thing about poetry to you?
So I would say for me, the most important thing, about poetry is recognizing that it's not a luxury, but it's a privilege to not only write, but write about the things that we get to write about, um, in the safety and security that many of us are sitting in right now in our homes. And there are a lot of people in this world who aren't. And tomorrow we may not be either, and that may shift the poems or whatever we're writing in a way that we never thought was imaginable, where the task becomes less our love of language and maybe our love of survival and recording the history that won't be told. So I try to keep that in mind. I try to keep that in mind that that's a privilege that I have. Well, poetry is not a luxury, and that I need to continue to do what I can to not only remember that, but create space for other writers in any way I can, because of the fact that there are other stories that need to be told. And I will have plenty of space to tell my own, and so will everybody else, but not if we don't really make that happen for each other.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Quintin. Thank you for the reading. Thank you for the beautiful answers to your questions. And we're going to move now to the open mic. And feel free to relax and look at the comments in the chat room. And we'll check back in with you at 8:30 before we say goodbye to see if you have a last word. That's okay. All right. Thank you. All righty. So now we are moving into the open mic, and I'm going to turn off the recording.